The envelope in Elena Ripley's trembling hands wasn't supposed to exist. 3 minutes ago, she'd been dusting the mahogany shelves in Richard Vanderbilt's private study, the one room in the sprawling Manhattan penthouse where staff was explicitly forbidden after 8 p.m. But Mrs. Chen had called in sick, and someone needed to prepare the study for tomorrow's board meeting, and Elena had made the fatal mistake of being efficient. Now she stood frozen, the cream-colored envelope in her grip, its contents spilling a secret that could topple an empire. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another story that's going to grab your heart and not let go. I'm so glad you're here. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you cozy at home? On your commute? Let me know. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button because, trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this story. Now, let's dive back in. The DNA test results stared back at her. Richard Vanderbilt, Jr., the golden heir to the Vanderbilt pharmaceutical fortune, the man whose coffee she made every morning, whose designer suits she sent to the dry cleaner, wasn't Richard Vanderbilt Sr.'s biological son. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She shouldn't be seeing this. She shouldn't be here. The study door clicked open behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" She spun around, the envelope slipping from her fingers, papers scattering across the Persian rug like incriminating snowflakes. Jack Vanderbilt stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame backlit by the hallway chandelier, his steel-gray eyes locked on the documents at her feet. Not Richard, Jr., his younger brother, the one they called the spare heir, the one who watched everything with those calculating eyes that missed nothing, the one who, Elena realized with ice flooding her veins, now knew she'd discovered his family's most dangerous secret. His jaw tightened as he stepped into the room, closing the door with a soft, terrifying click. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Elena's mouth went dry. She'd worked for the Vanderbilts for 2 years, invisible as wallpaper, grateful for the job that paid her mother's medical bills. In one careless moment, she'd crossed a line that people like her didn't come back from. I was just cleaning, Mr. Vanderbilt. I didn't mean to—" "Didn't mean to read confidential documents?" His voice was quiet. Controlled, which somehow made it worse. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something darker. Danger, maybe. Or opportunity. Or didn't mean to get caught. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Elena's racing mind couldn't fully process. Because here's what she did know. Jack Vanderbilt had been the one to order this DNA test. The envelope was addressed to him, not his father, which meant the spare heir was gathering ammunition, which meant this wasn't just a family secret. This was a weapon. And Elena Ripley, the help, the invisible woman who served canapes at their galas and laundered their lies along with their linens, had just stumbled into the middle of a war. Jack's eyes narrowed as he studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. A flash of recognition, maybe, or calculation. "How much did you see?" Everything. She'd seen everything. The question was, what would he do about it? Elena had exactly 3 seconds to decide if she was going to lie to a man who could end her with a single phone call. "I saw enough," she whispered, lifting her chin even as her knees threatened to buckle. "The DNA results. Richard Jr. isn't. He's not your father's son." Jack's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered behind those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that the help had a spine. He crouched down, gathering the scattered papers with deliberate precision, and Elena noticed his hands weren't quite steady. He wasn't just dangerous, he was desperate. Sit down, Miss Ripley. I should go. Sit. She sank into the leather chair by the window, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Her mother's hospice care cost $8,000 a month. Her younger sister Maria's college tuition was due in 6 weeks. Everything depended on this job, on staying invisible, on not making waves in a world that had no place for girls from the Bronx who cleaned penthouses. Jack poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the crystal decanter, an oddly civilized gesture that somehow made everything more surreal. He handed her one, and their fingers brushed. His were ice cold. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. 2 years, Mr. Vanderbilt. Jack, if we're going to conspire together, we should at least be on a first-name basis. Conspire? Elena's pulse spiked. I'm not conspiring with anyone. I'm just trying to keep my job and pretend I didn't see. You can't pretend. He took a long drink, his gaze never leaving hers. Not now. My brother Richard is about to be named CEO of Vanderbilt Pharmaceuticals, $300 billion company, 40,000 employees, government contracts worth more than most countries' GDP. If this, he gestured to the papers, gets out before I'm ready, it all falls apart. Before you're ready? Elena set down her untouched whiskey. This is about the succession. You want to take his place. A slow, dangerous smile curved Jack's mouth. You're smarter than they give you credit for. They don't give me any credit at all. I'm furniture. Not anymore. He leaned forward, intensity radiating off him like heat. Here's what's going to happen, Elena. You're going to help me verify this information quietly, without alerting my father or Richard. And in exchange, I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about money again. It was a devil's bargain, wrapped in $1,000 bills and delivered by a man whose last name opened doors Elena had never dreamed of walking through. But devil's bargains always came with a price. And if I refuse? She asked, though they both knew she couldn't afford to. Jack's smile faded. Then I'll have to ensure your silence another way. And trust me, Elena, you don't want to find out what that looks like. The threat hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Outside the study windows, Manhattan glittered with 1,000,000 lights, each one representing someone who'd made a choice between survival and surrender. Elena was about to make hers. Elena's answer died on her lips as the study door burst open. Richard Vanderbilt, Jr. stood in the doorway, his perfect smile faltering as he took in the scene. His brother, the housekeeper, 2 glasses of whiskey, and the papers scattered across their father's desk. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Richard said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Jack, I didn't realize you'd started entertaining staff in Father's private study." Jack didn't flinch. "Elena was cleaning. We were just discussing her schedule." "At 9:30 at night? With Father's Macallan 1946? Richard's blue eyes, so different from Jack's gray ones, swept over Elena with the kind of casual cruelty she'd learned to make herself small against. "That's a $40,000 bottle, sweetheart. Little above your pay grade." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks, but before she could stammer an apology, Jack stood. "Leave her alone, Richard." "Leave her alone?" Richard laughed, but there was no warmth in it. He moved closer, and Elena caught the scent of gin and entitlement. "Since when do you defend the help, little brother?" "Oh, wait." His gaze sharpened, sliding to the papers on the desk. "What were you two really doing in here?" The air turned electric. Elena watched Jack's jaw tighten, watched him calculate odds and outcomes with the kind of speed that came from a lifetime of playing second fiddle to a brother who'd always had everything handed to him. "Nothing that concerns you," Jack said quietly. "Everything in this house concerns me. I'm the heir, remember?" Richard reached for the papers, but Jack was faster, scooping them up and holding them just out of reach. For a moment, the two brothers stared at each other, and Elena saw something she'd never witnessed in 2 years of invisible service, pure, unadulterated hatred. "Give me those papers, Jack." "No." Richard's perfect composure cracked. He lunged forward, grabbing for the documents, and suddenly the two men were struggling, crashing into the desk. The whiskey bottle tipped, amber liquid spreading across mahogany worth more than Elena's entire childhood home. "Stop!" Elena heard herself shout, but they didn't hear her. Papers flew. Richard's fist connected with Jack's jaw. Jack shoved back, and Richard stumbled into the shelf. The crystal trophy from Father's first pharmaceutical patent crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Everyone froze. "What the hell is going on in here?" Richard Vanderbilt Sr. stood in the doorway, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression carved from granite. Behind him, Elena could see Mrs. May Chen, who was supposed to be sick, and Margaret Holloway, the family lawyer, both wearing matching expressions of grim satisfaction. Oh, God, this was a setup. Jack realized it the same moment she did. His eyes met hers across the destroyed study, and in that split second, Elena understood. They'd been played. The question was, by whom, and what would it cost them both? "Father, I can explain," Richard started, but the old man's raised hand cut him off like a blade. "Save it." Richard Sr.'s voice could have frozen hell. His gaze swept over the wreckage, the shattered crystal, the spilled whiskey, his two sons standing on opposite sides of his sacred study like enemies at a border. Then his eyes landed on Elena, and she felt her entire future collapse. "You out. You're fired." "Sir, please." Elena's voice cracked. Her mother, Maria's tuition, everything. "She stays." Jack's words rang out, sharp and defiant. The room went silent. Even Richard Jr. looked shocked. "Excuse me?" The old man's eyebrows rose. Jack stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Elena in a gesture that felt both protective and damning. "Elena witnessed what happened. She's a witness to Richard's assault." "Unless you want her filing charges." "My assault?" Richard Jr.'s face flushed crimson. "You grabbed those papers first. You conniving—" "Enough!" Vanderbilt Sr. slammed his palm on the desk. "Margaret, take Miss Ripley to the kitchen. Get her statement. The rest of you stay exactly where you are." As Margaret led her out, Elena caught Jack's eye. He gave her the smallest nod. Trust me, but trust was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. In the sterile kitchen, Margaret poured coffee Elena didn't want and asked questions she couldn't safely answer. What was she doing in the study? What did she see? What were the brothers fighting about? Elena stuck to the safest version. She was cleaning, the brothers argued. Things escalated. She saw nothing else, nothing important. Margaret's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe a word. If you enjoyed this twist, drop a comment and let me know your theories. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to get even more intense. 2 hours later, Elena was signing an NDA so thick it could stop bullets, accepting a severance package that was either generous or hush money. She couldn't tell which, and being escorted out of the penthouse by building security. Her phone buzzed as she reached the lobby. "Unknown number. Don't sign anything else. Don't talk to anyone. Meet me at Riverside Park, 72nd Street entrance, 1 a.m. Come alone." J. Elena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the delete button. Every instinct screamed this was insane. Jack Vanderbilt was using her, manipulating her, dragging her into a family war that would crush her like an insect. But that severance package wouldn't cover her mother's care for more than 3 months. And Jack had said he'd make sure she never had to worry about money again. At 12:47 a.m., Elena found herself walking through the dark park, her heart hammering, pepper spray clutched in her coat pocket. Jack emerged from the shadows near the river, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened, a bruise blooming on his jaw. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure I should have." He smiled, a real smile this time, not the calculated ones she'd seen him wear like armor. "Probably not, but I'm glad you did, Elena, because I need to tell you the truth about what you found in that study." He paused, his gray eyes reflecting the city lights across the water. "Richard Jr. isn't just illegitimate. He's the reason my mother is dead." Elena's breath caught. "What?" Jack stared out at the dark Hudson, his profile sharp against the city glow. 15 years ago, my mother discovered Richard's paternity. She was going to tell my father, expose the affair, destroy the perfect Vanderbilt image. He turned to face her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her chest tighten. 3 days later, her car went off a cliff in the Hamptons. Brake failure, they said. Tragic accident. You think Richard, not Richard. He was 12 years old. Jack's jaw clenched. My father. Richard Sr. He knew about the affair all along. He knew Richard Jr. wasn't his biological son, and he didn't care, because Richard Jr. was perfect, charismatic, brilliant, everything the Vanderbilt heir should be. My mother was going to ruin that. So he made sure she couldn't. Elena's mind reeled. That's murder. That's power. Jack pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found one, a younger version of Richard Sr. with a beautiful dark-haired woman who had Jack's same gray eyes. My mother kept journals, documented everything. The affair, my father's threats, her plans to divorce him and take us with her. I found them 2 months ago, hidden in her old studio upstate. He handed Elena the phone. The journal entry was dated 3 days before the accident. Richard knows I know. He said if I leave, I'll lose everything. The boys, my reputation, my life. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. I'm scared. If anything happens to me. The entry ended there. Jack, this is evidence. You need to go to the police. With what? A 15-year-old car accident and the conspiracy theories of a grieving son? He laughed bitterly. My father owns half the NYPD. The Vanderbilt name opens doors and closes investigations. I need something concrete, something that proves Richard Jr.'s paternity and connects it to my mother's death, something that forces the board to act. The DNA test was ordered anonymously through a private lab. It's not enough. Jack moved closer, and Elena was suddenly acutely aware of how alone they were, how dangerous this all was. But you, Elena, you have access to places I don't. The staff quarters, my father's private files, Richard Jr.'s personal spaces. You're invisible to them. I'm fired, she reminded him. Not if I convince my father you're essential. Not if I make him believe keeping you close is safer than letting you go. His hand reached out, fingertips barely grazing her arm. I know I'm asking you to risk everything, but I promise you, help me expose the truth, and I'll make sure you and your family are set for life. Trust fund for your sister. The best care facility for your mother. A future where you never have to clean up after people who treat you like you're nothing. Elena should have walked away, should have run. Instead, she found herself asking, What do you need me to do? Jack's eyes lit with something between relief and admiration. "First, get your job back. Tomorrow morning you're going to walk into that penthouse and apologize. Play the grateful servant. Make them believe you're harmless. And then we burn their empire to the ground." Getting her job back was easier than Elena expected, which should have been her first warning. Richard Sr. himself called 3 days later, his voice dripping with magnanimous condescension. "Miss Ripley, I may have been hasty. Return Monday. Double your previous salary. We value loyalty in this household." Elena accepted with just the right amount of grateful trembling in her voice. But when she arrived Monday morning, everything had changed. Mrs. Chen watched her with suspicious eyes. Richard Jr. appeared in every room she cleaned, his presence a constant threat wrapped in designer cologne. And Jack barely looked at her, treating her with the same dismissive indifference he showed all the staff. It was an act. It had to be. Except at night. When she checked her phone for his messages, there was only silence. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Elena searched every room she was assigned, looking for her mother's journals, for evidence, for anything. She found nothing but expensive emptiness and the growing certainty that Jack had used her and disappeared. Then came the Thursday that shattered everything. Elena was delivering afternoon tea to the sunroom when she heard voices, Richard Jr. and a woman she didn't recognize, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. DNA test was Jack's doing, obviously. Little brother's getting desperate. "Does your father know?" the woman asked. "Father knows everything. Always has." Richard Jr. laughed. "Jack thinks he's so clever, playing detective with Mother's old journals. He has no idea Father already destroyed the originals years ago. Everything Jack found, planted evidence. Father's been 3 steps ahead this entire time." Elena's blood turned to ice. "And the girl? The housekeeper?" "Elena!" Richard's voice dripped with amusement. "She's the perfect pawn. Jack thinks he's recruited her to spy for him. Father thinks she's his insurance policy against Jack making a move. Neither of them realizes she's completely expendable." The teacup slipped from Elena's shaking hands, shattering against marble. The conversation stopped. Elena ran. She made it to the service elevator before strong hands grabbed her, spinning her around. Richard Jr.'s handsome face was cold, calculating. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" "Let me go." "Can't do that. You've heard too much. Again." He tightened his grip, and Elena saw her future collapse into a single, terrifying moment. "You know, my father's really quite brilliant. He knew Jack would try to recruit someone from inside. We've been watching you both this entire time. Every search you conducted, every file you touched, all monitored, all evidence of conspiracy. Jack is currently being arrested for corporate espionage and attempting to frame me with falsified DNA evidence." Richard's smile was venomous. "Turns out those authentic lab results were fabricated. Jack's going to prison, Elena. And you? You're the witness who's going to testify against him." "I won't." "You will. Or your mother's hospice care gets a very interesting phone call about insurance fraud. Your sister's scholarship revoked. Your entire family destroyed." He released her, straightening his tie. "Choose wisely, Miss Ripley. Loyalty to the Vanderbilts has always been rewarding." Elena watched him walk away, her world crumbling into ash and lies. She'd trusted Jack Vanderbilt, and it might have just cost her everything. Elena didn't go home that night. She couldn't. Instead, she sat in a 24-hour diner in Queens, drinking cold coffee and staring at her phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting for Jack to call and explain, waiting for proof that she hadn't been a complete fool. The phone stayed silent. At 3 a.m., a different call came. Unknown number. "Miss Ripley?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "My name is Catherine Torres. I'm an investigative journalist with the Times. I believe we have a mutual interest in the Vanderbilt family." Elena's exhausted brain struggled to process. "How did you get this number?" "Jack Vanderbilt gave it to me. 3 weeks ago, right after you agreed to help him. He said if anything happened to him, I should contact you immediately." A pause. "Miss Ripley, Jack isn't in jail. He's in hiding." "And everything Richard told you today? It was a test." The diner spun. "What?" "Jack planted a listening device in the sunroom 2 days ago. He knew they'd try to scare you off, try to make you think he'd betrayed you. He needed them to reveal their hand. And they did. That conversation you overheard? We have every word recorded." Hope, dangerous and desperate, flared in Elena's chest. "Then why hasn't he contacted me?" "Because they're watching you. Your phone, your apartment, everything. Meeting me was the only safe play." Catherine's voice softened. "Elena, Jack asked me to tell you something. He said you'd know what it means. The journals were never the end game. You were." "You were." Elena's mind raced back through every interaction, every moment. Jack hadn't been recruiting her to find evidence. He'd been using her presence to force his family to reveal their crimes on record. She was never the pawn. She was the catalyst. "There's a car outside," Catherine continued. "Black sedan, license plate JVR 2847. Get in. We're taking you somewhere safe. And then Jack can explain everything. But Elena, you need to decide right now if you're truly in this fight. Because what comes next, exposing a family this powerful, it's going to get dangerous." Through the diner window, Elena spotted the sedan, and standing beside it, partially hidden in shadow, a familiar tall figure with gray eyes that caught the streetlight. Jack. He was here. He'd been protecting her all along. "Hey, everyone, we're at the turning point. Are you feeling this tension? Drop a comment with your predictions. And if you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button because the finale is going to blow your mind." Elena stood, legs shaky but determined. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being safe, being small. Not anymore. She walked out of that diner and straight to Jack Vanderbilt, who looked at her with relief, and something else, something that made her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Ready to finish this?" he asked quietly. Elena thought of her mother, her sister, every person the Vanderbilts had crushed under their designer heels. "Let's burn it all down," she said. Jack smiled, fierce and beautiful and real. "That's my girl." Together they disappeared into the night, and the real war began. The Vanderbilt Pharmaceuticals' annual shareholder meeting was supposed to be a coronation. Instead, it became an execution. Elena stood in the back of the ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, wearing a server's uniform that made her invisible among the catering staff. Her hands trembled as she carried champagne flutes, but her resolve was steel. On stage, Richard Sr. stood at the podium, silver-haired and commanding, preparing to announce his successor. Richard Jr. sat front row, already basking in anticipated glory. Neither noticed Jack slip into the sound booth. "Ladies and gentlemen," the old man began, "today marks a new chapter for Vanderbilt Pharmaceuticals." The screens behind him flickered. His confident smile faltered. Suddenly, his own voice filled the ballroom, crisp and damning. "The boy isn't mine, Margaret. Never was. But he's the heir I need, charismatic, controllable, untainted by my actual bloodline's instability." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard Jr. went white. Another recording played. Richard Sr. speaking with cold calculation. Diane was going to destroy everything with her ridiculous moral stand. The break line was necessary. Tragic, but necessary. Chaos erupted. Reporters surged forward. Security scrambled. But Jack wasn't finished. The screens shifted to documents, authenticated DNA tests showing Richard Jr.'s true paternity, forensic reports on the accident that killed Jack's mother, financial records showing bribes to investigators, threatening messages to potential whistleblowers. 15 years of crimes laid bare in high definition. Elena watched Richard Sr.'s empire collapse in real time. Board members stood, outraged. Law enforcement moved toward the stage. Richard Jr. tried to run, but found his exit blocked by Catherine Torres and a wall of cameras. Through it all, Jack's voice played over the speakers, calm and devastating. My name is Jack Vanderbilt. For 15 years, I've watched my father cover up my mother's murder and build his empire on lies. Today, that ends. The evidence you're seeing has been verified by independent sources and delivered to federal prosecutors. Justice for Diane Vanderbilt starts now. Security finally cut the feed, but it was too late. The footage was already streaming live across every major network. Elena felt a hand on her elbow, Jack appearing beside her as pandemonium reigned. His eyes were bright, fierce, triumphant. We did it, he breathed. But Elena saw what he didn't. Richard Sr. breaking free from security, his face twisted with rage, pulling something from his jacket. Jack! Elena shoved him sideways as the gunshot cracked through the ballroom. Pain exploded in her shoulder. She fell, Jack catching her, his face stricken with horror. More security descended. Richard Sr. was tackled, the weapon kicked away. People screamed, but Elena barely heard it. She looked up at Jack, whose hands pressed desperately against her bleeding shoulder, and managed a weak smile. Told you, I'm not just the help. Elena, stay with me. His voice broke. Don't you dare leave me. Not now, not after everything. Sirens wailed. Paramedics rushed in. As darkness tugged at Elena's vision, she heard Jack's whispered promise, I've got you. I promise, I've got you. 3 months later, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee that she, for once, hadn't made herself. Jack appeared in the doorway of the guest room, her room now in his newly purchased brownstone far from the Vanderbilt penthouse, carrying a tray with breakfast and that soft smile he only seemed to wear around her. Physical therapy in an hour, he reminded her, setting the tray on her lap. But I made pancakes first. Doctor's orders. Your doctor didn't say that. My doctor doesn't know how stubborn you are about eating. He sat on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding her healing shoulder. How's the pain? Better. It was true. The bullet had done less damage than it could have. A through and through that missed everything vital. Still, recovery had been slow, frustrating, and made bearable only by Jack's constant presence. He'd barely left her side since that day at the plaza. Richard Sr.'s sentencing is tomorrow, Jack said quietly. Murder, attempted murder, fraud, bribery. They're saying 40 years minimum. And Richard Jr. accepted a plea deal, 10 years. He's testifying against father in exchange for leniency. Jack's expression was complicated, relief mixed with old wounds that might never fully heal. It's over, Elena. Really over. She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. What about you, the company? The board voted. I'm interim CEO until we can restructure completely. He laughed softly. Turns out being the legitimate heir and the whistleblower gives you a certain moral authority. Who knew? I knew. Elena squeezed his hand. You're going to transform that place. Make it what your mother would have wanted. Something flickered in Jack's eyes, grief and gratitude tangled together. We're renaming the charitable foundation after her, the Diane Vanderbilt Foundation for Truth and Justice. And you're going to help me run it. Jack, I'm not... You're brilliant, brave, and you see people others ignore. You're exactly who we need. He paused, his gray eyes searching hers. Besides, I'm not ready to let you out of my sight yet. Possibly ever. Elena's heart stuttered. Over the past 3 months, something had shifted between them. Late-night conversations during her recovery, shared looks that lasted too long, touches that felt like promises. But neither had acknowledged it aloud. Until now. Jack Vanderbilt, she said softly, are you asking me to stay? I'm asking you to build something new with me. Something honest and real and nothing like the toxic empire my father created. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And yes, Elena Ripley, I'm asking you to stay. Not as the help, not as an employee, as my partner, in everything. His lips brushed hers, tentative and asking permission. Elena granted it, kissing him back with all the emotion she'd been holding in, gratitude and hope, and something that felt dangerously like love. When they finally broke apart, Jack rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he murmured, for being brave enough to see the truth, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for saving my life. You saved mine first, Elena reminded him. You gave me a future. We gave each other one. Outside the window, New York City sprawled in all its chaotic glory, a place where invisible girls could become heroes, where empires could fall, where justice sometimes, against all odds, prevailed. Elena's mother was in the best care facility in Manhattan now, improving daily. Maria had a full scholarship to Columbia, secured through the foundation. And Elena herself? She was no longer the help. She was exactly where she belonged, beside a man who saw her, valued her, and loved her for the warrior she'd always been. So, Jack said, pulling back with a grin that transformed his entire face. Ready to change the world? Elena smiled back, fierce and free and finally, beautifully, seen. Let's get to work.